Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we return to Final Fantasy IX, which just last year, I played for the first time ever. I'm the owner of some pretty weird Final Fantasy opinions. I'm kind of in the middle on Final Fantasy X. I love Final Fantasy 13 too. As time goes on, I dislike Final Fantasy 15 more and more. I love Final Fantasy 7 like pretty much every other person on this planet. I've never played Final Fantasy VIII. I have enjoyed a lot of Final Fantasy VI Advance. And then I played Final Fantasy IX. And everyone got in the back of the line because this is my favorite one yet. This is Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy's favorite Final Fantasy game. And this is the last true classic Final Fantasy game when you look at it. The one that tackles the mature, tough themes like loneliness, war, death. And when they actually tackle friendship, it's not like the, yeah, power of friendship, we got this. It's more like a real, true development of character. And it's a sad game. It was a really, really moving game. More moving than any game from the 90s I can personally think of. So with such a mature experience, I really wanted to let it marinate, think about it for a while, and then deliver my thoughts like I am in today's video. Now, as I said for my Chrono Trigger video, normally with these types of I played this for the first time ever videos, I don't show off the box copy of the game because it's more like a review from a first timer's perspective. But I just wanted to show you all what the Switch version comes with in case you were thinking about picking it up, because I think it's pretty important that you know this here is the coolest part about it all. We have an Asian English copy, so you'll see there's no rating here on the front or the back. This is a legitimate copy of the game. It cost me 50 bucks when I bought it over on eBay. You pop it open, that's all you got. Definitely not their best effort. And that even goes for the port itself. If you can play this on PC modded, do that because it looks better, it runs better. It still has all the bells and whistles that this version introduces, like a turbo mode, which lets you go through battle and explore the world quicker. It lets you do the 9,999 damage mode. It has all of that. Plus, they actually put effort into the visuals. So if you can mod it, take that route. I played it on my Switch, so I had the handheld option. I also played it docked. And now, let's talk about this game. So it starts off as this very, I think, light-hearted JRPG. You're planning to kidnap the queen, and you're a group of bandits heading into a castle where a theater performance is on. And it's very odd, I would say. But it never really set quite the tone that the game ends with, which is a very somber tale when you look at it all, when you collect it all. We won't be spoiling it in this video. We'll be talking generally over some details and some key points in this game, so don't worry about that. But this was a game that caught me by surprise. Now, the combat, we're not going to talk about it much in this video because we're talking about a 90s game that really was the last of its kind, didn't have much going for it on that front, still isn't that fun to play. It's that real-time active battle system where the timer's going, the turns really never pause no matter what you do in the settings. You can turn it to pause when you're in item menus, but it doesn't pause if you're picking a move, so you have to be like very quick on what you want to do next. And so sometimes I did find myself just turning on the speed boost, turning on the 9,999 damage mode, and just being like, get me to the next story point, because that's what I'm really here for at this moment in time. Like, the gameplay is just too old to be fully enjoyable in my opinion. There's too many turn-based games that have passed it by. So we're really going to be talking story here. And with remake rumors, I got to say, I'm pretty excited to see maybe Final Fantasy IX retold and have good combat. That will be something to behold. Because while everyone's out there celebrating Final Fantasy VII, this deserves the remake, I feel. Not that Final Fantasy VII didn't, but this is just as good, if not better. So, where I really got captured after this whole abducting of Dagger, aka Prince Scarlet, is when you get to Dali Village. So you've escaped, you're out of the woods now, the woods have turned into this kind of concrete, and you're like, what is going on here in this world? You get to Dali Village, and the soundtrack kicks in. And I know I made a mistake in my Chrono Trigger video where I was really praising Nobuo Uematsu, but I know now I can actually really praise him to the high heavens for his work here in Final Fantasy IX. Oh my gosh. When this track kicks off, this calming, soothing, and then it takes on a sad form as you learn the truth of this place. It's one of the best composed pieces in the entire series, I think. And there are a lot of those moments in this game. I'm sure many of you have played it. know what moment I'm referring to. We'll talk about it. But once you learn what's happening beneath the village, right? You approach this quaint town. Everyone's doing all right. You got an inn. It's a typical JRPG farm town. And you go underneath, and it creates this very strong, compelling reason to keep your eye on Vivi, who is probably the best party member in the game. You know, this black mage who's not really sure about his past. He's not quite the typical amnesiac character, like, who am I? Where am I? It doesn't really play with that. It's so delicately written in that regard, in the way you encounter things with Vivi's past and how he handles it. It's incredible how human this not human character is. Again, especially looking at it for its time. We're talking about Final Fantasy IX in the 90s, where even JRPGs didn't handle these characters with the greatest care, I would say. There was so much time for development, but they were all focused on being grind machines. This was a true character-driven journey. And there were others that I don't think get their roses too much, which is like Freya Crescent. Freya in Burmecia, that was my next favorite part of the game. You get to Burmecia, again, the somberness kicks in, it's moody, the soundtrack picks up, it starts to rain as you walk in, and you really get introduced to Alexandria's as a place, their plans for the future, and just how dominant they are compared to everyone else. Kind of putting the villain into perspective, but with the rain, with the music, it again sets that tone, which you really have to do a superb job to accomplish with games back then, because you don't have the graphics, you don't have the draw distance, you don't have the gameplay to sell all of these moments. You have to do it through text, music, and in this case, weather, to create that same feeling. And it's just so tough to do with a game that looks honestly as bad as Final Fantasy IX does. So Burmecia and Dali Village were like my two standout early game moments that hooked me and went like, I'm here for the ride. And then there are more character developments. I think of Beatrix and Steiner, their awkward romance development that didn't feel forced. Get that. I look at some JRPGs as I keep going back into that well, and some of them it's like, we don't need a love story every time. But with this one, it felt so genuine. You know, they didn't want to be enemies. It reminds me of what people say about Suikoden 2. You're on two sides of the war, and you understand each other's beliefs, but you love each other clearly, but you can't bend the knee for your cause. And the way these two end up working together, I loved it. I think one of the most under-discussed parts of the game from my research. And then you got, what was it, Kina? I don't know how to say her name. Pretty much Boo. Like Majin Buu in Final Fantasy IX. Like, Boo, hungry. Like, the way you read the dialogue sounds like Boo. So this character just sucks. I don't know why they're in the game. I'm sure someone in the comments will enlighten me on some compelling moment tucked deep in the corners of this game. I do not care. 90% of the game, this character does nothing. I just, whatever. It's a dumb character. I believe it was only introduced simply because they needed to give you a fourth party member at a certain point in the story. It has the stupid mini game with the capturing of the toads or the frogs. Look, it's an old game in that regard too. Only part of the game beyond the combat that I can sit there and go, I don't really enjoy you that much. Let's go back to the positives though. We got to talk about the moment. The moment of the game. Arguably, I would say, in my opinion, the moment of the series, the entire franchise. Not alone. The music here, again, chef's kiss would be doing it a disservice. The way that they elevated Zidane's character, your main protagonist, and the way that they managed to make him feel so supported by every party member of the game during his lowest moment, and how epic of a track this is, and a reminder that you're never alone. I mean, it was a moving moment, unlike many things I've experienced in games. It almost moved me to tears. I was like, this is so powerful. You know, because Zidane is this cool, quirky protagonist, and a good protagonist at that. And he's interesting because you see he's got this tail, and you're like, what's going on with this? And once you start to learn the origins of that, him sitting there and going, effectively, my whole story has turned my world upside down. And the understandable frustration and sadness and lack of care he'd have for everyone around him from that point makes sense. But his friends never gave up on him. And that's the one time the gameplay surges, because they all step in. They're like, we got your back. You're not going to do this alone. We're going to fight with you. A powerful moment in video game history. One of the very best. And from there, I think it plateaus, which isn't a bad place to plateau from, because with such a pinnacle moment, it could only nosedive, I feel. But you start to learn about Gaia, Terra, genomes, the crystal world, planets merging. It reminds me a bit of, I'd say for a recent example, Tales of Arise, where it's like the characters and the superstars here. What's happening with the planets and the reasoning for it is important lore, is cool, is interesting. But for me, overall, it's like you're kind of losing me here. This isn't what I care about. It's about the characters and how they're doing and how their adventure will end. What's the fate of Vivi, Steiner, Zidane, Garnet, aka Dagger? Like, what's the fate of Freya? What's the fate of everyone? Like, that's what I was invested in. Aiko, Adamant, I think his name is. That guy I don't really care about either. I was so invested in their stories. You get to the ending and just a wonderful ending. A wonderful ending, a sad ending, a happy ending at the same time. Again, if you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. Just a special game overall. A really, really special game. And one that I'm so thrilled that when my friend told me, you should play this, I think you'd really like it. I looked it up, and my mantra is, and I know a lot of you collectors out there are like, famous last words, like, yeah, I bought this, I'm going to play it one day. And you never do. At least buying it physically, I have something physically there to stare me in the face and go like, you gonna play me? You gonna play me? And I eventually get around to it. So for me, I bought in on the physical copy. I was like, all right, here we go. Like, I'm gonna go for it. I played it right away. 35 hours. And what an adventure it was. So happy I did play it. Best Final Fantasy story by far. And if they remake this thing, I will be screeching about how awesome that is. I just hope with the rumors of also a kids TV show for what I think is like the saddest Final Fantasy game I've played, you know, I hope they don't dumb it down. That's the one thing I'm worried about, because this is a story that should not be tampered with. Anyway, that's all I've got to say when it comes to Final Fantasy IX. I'm certainly looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Do you have any fond memories with this series? Let me know down below. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.